Maokai used to be the best frontline tank in the game. Then, Riot reworked him into an awkward engage champion, with a new ultimate that travelled even slower than Act 1 of Arcane. Just kidding guys, the show was perfect. I'll order some Jinx merchandise and you can forgive me, okay? But I have found a master player named MidKai, the expert of playing Maokai Mid, in a new role, a new playstyle, and having new tricks to catch enemies and make the ultimate land immediately. This video is sponsored by Porofessor. It's my favourite League of Legends companion app that helps you in-game as well as out of game, but it also has some great new features, like the patch notes tab, a quick summary of all the changes since the last patch, specialising in champions you played recently, with a quick summary of each champion so you don't have to read Riot's new essay every time you log in. It shows champion changes, item changes, rune changes, and even has links to a ton of the old patches as well in case you want to catch up even further. Another feature I've never shown off is the tips Porofessor gives. Get in Champ Select and then hover your mouse over the book icon next to a champion to see information like who to pick to beat it, their ability cooldowns, their damage type, and most importantly their recent changes, so you never miss a big change. Porofessor also shows good bans for your chosen champion to help increase your win rate, along with all the other great features like runes being automatically imported, stats analysis while you're in the game, and a tab to find friends to play with. Porofessor is completely free, download it now from the link in the description. Back to our Maokai. Our player today has a very wholesome story. Unlike most players who choose their champion based on their gameplay, how impressive the visuals are, or maybe even their lore, MidKai has a different reason. In Season 11, while attending science class, he began to learn about the water cycle. The water cycle shows how water is in a continuous loop of reuse, falling as rainfall to running downhill back to the oceans, lakes, and plants, where it then evaporates, returning to the clouds ready to fall again as rain. I know, you never expected to be learning biology from a League of Legends channel, but here we are. MidKai surprisingly loved this concept and became very interested in this natural recycling of resources, especially involving plants. Buying his first terrarium and seeing it continuously thrive, sealed off in a jar away from human input. This weirdly got him obsessed with self-sufficient plants, and so when he would play League, what other character could he play than Maokai? Recycling health from enemies with his passive, planting new saplings, and controlling fights with his roots. It was perfect. There was only one problem: he was on an amateur team and they already had a top laner. The only spot available was mid lane, so MidKai decided to adapt to his new environment, creating Maokai Mid, a super strong frontline champion that, just like his terrarium, refused to die no matter what situation it was put into. But it was not an easy path. Maokai Mid did not start out well. In fact, the champion had many problems he had to fix. Maokai is melee, and so in mid lane, he plays against ranged champions much more often than top. He has no escapes to avoid ganks, and he cannot really win all-ins early on because of his long cooldowns. The main way Maokai Mid survives lane is with a ton of unique rune setups. He has pages for immobile mages, scaling champions, strong early game champions, assassins, bruisers, and even AD ranged mids. Each one solves a problem, like this one against immobile mages. He takes grasp for trading, and has great minor runes for sustaining against their poke. Or against scaling champions, he has a phase rush page, which lets him run circles around them early on. I'll give you the full runes and how he uses them later on, but let's look at how he fixes Maokai's other problems. Level 1, MidKai takes Q. This is his main ability for laning, letting him last hit multiple CS even when he's pressured by a ranged mid. Most of the time Maokai gets wave pushed towards him, which is a good thing. Then at level 2, Maokai takes W. Mid lane is the shortest lane by far, and so if you're playing a meta champion against a good mid laner, it's going to be a very hard gank. But Maokai Mid changes this. It's not a huge surprise to anyone that Maokai can flash W, but in mid lane it's much more effective than top, as champions are more squishy, so 1 CC is all you need to set up a gank. MidKai even likes to roam at level 2, using Q to push the wave as fast as possible, walking out of vision and leaving lane. He runs to a side lane as fast as possible and gets a gank off with his early CC. MidKai recommends even teleporting back if you need to catch the wave. With most mid champions having great wave clear, the wave often pushes to MidKai, so he freezes the wave just outside his tower range, setting up these easy ganks. Q Flash is another good tool to set up ganks. It knocks the enemy back instantly, pushing them into your teammates, which can set up their damage. Maokai's biggest strength in top lane is his sustain with passive. It helps him a ton in lane, and this is the same for mid. In all matchups, Maokai's free health regen lets him stay alive in lane so he can match poke champions. It's also the main way Maokai wins 1v1, using the health gain to outplay enemies and keep his health just higher than their damage. This level 2 play is the perfect 1v1. He uses his W invulnerability to dodge Yone's most important ability, avoiding the damage and knockup to outplay him for a solo kill. W dodge is vital against champions with a setup ability, like a Syndra stun or a Pike E. If these abilities land, you're locked down, taking a ton of damage and you're going to die. If you dodge them with your W, the CC will miss and the enemy loses their combo, so you have the next move. Since Maokai has no dashes to avoid ganks, MidKai uses these sapling spots in side bushes to spot the enemy jungler. If they walk in, they will be slowed and he can run away. If there's a 2 vs 2, these are incredible for chasing enemies. He even buys boots of swiftness, as these are the highest movement speed, which makes his little saplings run even faster. It's a funny interaction, so you can chase enemies easier, and can get you extra kills in situations where usually they would just outrun the little tree. For further setup, he always throws a sapling behind the enemy in any play, whether it's a gank or a fight. This cuts off their escape and guarantees they're going to die. It's much better than throwing it on top of them because it takes a couple seconds for the sapling to wake up. At level 6, MidKai gets his ultimate that he uses in a super unique way I've never seen before. Maokai used to have a great ultimate. He was meta for years thanks to it. As soon as his ult got changed, he started to struggle. The new ult was awkward, he wasn't as tanky and often became useless in fights. But MidKai has found a way to use it that turns him into a playmaker. Using his ultimate at an angle, it comes out of the ground and immediately connects with the enemy, rooting them for just long enough for him to land his other skills and combo them to death. In this game, he's struggling. He's taking a ton of damage from Yone's infinite Q spam, but with this trick, he has a way to turn it around. He predicts that Yone is going to take tower aggro and ults to immediately lock him down and ignite for the solo kill. Using ult like this in a fight can lock down extra enemies instantly, so it's a great way to guarantee it will land. Maokai's full combo is W into ultimate then Q. This gives you a full CC chain for around 2.5 seconds. It's pretty much like having a Malzahar ult, so you can make plays very easily. By now you might have noticed his weird summoner spell choices. He actually swaps summoners almost every game, choosing between Flash, Teleport, Ignite and even Exhaust on Maokai. He chooses Flash when he plays against CC to make sure he doesn't die from ganks, but he can give up Flash against some champions, like Assassins, instead taking Exhaust, so that if they go in, they're not going to kill him anyway. He's tanky and he's reducing all of their damage. He takes Ignite against immobile champions, letting him poke them down, chase them and get a solo kill in lane. Teleport is another option, replacing the Ignite in matchups where you just need to survive. So like if he plays against a mage who has a ton of poke. He can take lots of damage, recall and come back to lane on full health. And it's also insane for flanking later on in the game. As soon as Maokai gets one item, he has a huge power spike and is ready to take early fights. MidKai doesn't actually buy a mythic item first, believing the cost is too high for the stats you get, since you're spending a lot of the gold on the mythic passive that doesn't give you any value until later in the game, and you're also spending a lot of the gold on both armor and magic resist together, rather than being a specialist in just one. So he chooses to stack a lot of just one type of resistances, based on the enemy team, either buying Randuin's Omen, which is 80 armor compared to the 25 armor you get on a mythic, as well as giving the super strong AoE slow, or he buys Abyssal Mask, which has more health and magic resist than any mythic, as well as giving 7 bonus magic resist per nearby enemy, so when you're in a fight it goes up even more. With these stacked resistances, the first fight is a huge one. Maokai can already tank multiple enemies and stay alive in the backline, long enough for his team to roll over the fight. With this build, it always looks like Maokai's team is just better. They look like they're on the same page, they're always arriving first, and they're always collapsing well. And this is true sometimes, but a lot of the time what's actually going on is Maokai can start a fight and stall for a really long time until his team are there to help. He can bait enemies into bad fights. Even in Master Tier, enemies see an immobile champion that may not even have Flash. They look for a catch in the river and try and kill him quickly before anyone arrives. But Maokai can stall for so long thanks to his CC, dodging damage with his W, and healing with his passive. He can always stall long enough for his teammates to arrive and a fight to start. From this point on, he's basically just playing like normal Maokai, but with two big differences. He gets increased resources playing mid, so XP and gold, and he's also now in a team comp that's much different to usual, which makes Maokai better. Usually Maokai is a top laner, so he has to be the main frontline. He'll likely be the only tanky champion on his team. If he goes in at the wrong time, he's he's not going to get a kill and he'll die solo. But if you're playing Maokai mid, you can still get a tanky top laner, or even better, a bruiser, giving you a buddy to dive with, making it much easier to finish off kills. Against a squishy team, you are going to win the fight. AD carries and immobile mid laners cannot do enough damage to kill you fast enough before they die, so this new synergy with your team comp makes Maokai mid even better. MidKai is a big fan of side laning. He emphasizes you need to be getting all of the gold and XP from these waves, and you're also pretty good in 1v1s later on. Maokai can use his passive over and over again in the fight, so he wins a lot of matchups even just as a tank. But Maokai's biggest strength is Teamfights. At the start of the fight, MidKai wants to set up Saplings in bushes. This lets them control the vision in the bush, so his team can walk up safely. In the fight, these Saplings are great for slows, denying the enemies from making plays. Once the fight starts, Maokai is the leader. He chooses who to focus. The best way to win is to catch an enemy with W in front of your teammates, so they can be focused down. Your Q knockup and your ultimate provide extra CC, so the catch should always lead to a kill. With this build and his skill order, Maokai W is on a 6-second cooldown, so it's going to be back up pretty much as soon as you get the first kill, letting Maokai engage again onto a second enemy for another kill. If his team is engaged on first, he can deny plays and peel for his teammates. The more mobility that Riot adds to the game, as well as crazy OP abilities, the better point and click CC like Maokai W becomes. So in fights, if there's a Season 11 or even a Season 12 champion, a single W will be enough to shut them down. It's like playing rock paper scissors. The OP new champions beat the champions from say Season 5. Those Season 5 champions beat the super old champions from like 10 years ago, but the super old champions have outdated point and click abilities that are great versus the new Season 11 ones. So a champion like Maokai can become relevant again. The hardest part of Maokai is his ultimate, so here is how MidKai uses it. Ideally you want to ult long range and follow it into the fight. The longer the ult travels, the longer it roots enemies. So ideally he wants to get behind enemies, ulting through a wall from Fog of War, so it pops out unexpectedly, trapping the whole enemy team for an easy cleanup. He can ult short range if he needs CC for peel, ulting in the direction enemies are running to follow them and try and get an extra kill. Here's a good example of an unexpected ultimate. The gold in this game's pretty even, the enemies even snuck a Baron, so they're slightly ahead. Maokai's teammate is being caught mid, so he comes in from the side with a long range ultimate to help them escape. This ult forces the enemies back, catches some of them in a choke point, so Maokai can land W onto an important target as the ult hits other people. Maokai tanks all of their damage as a true frontliner and wins the fight. When playing mid, he bans Cassiopeia every game, since her W blocks dashes. This destroys Maokai. He can't use his W in fights, so he takes way too much damage early on. For his build, MidKai again has very specific items, starting Doran's shield against all ranged champions, and Doran's ring against melees. His first item is never a mythic, instead buying Randuins versus mostly AD enemy teams, or Abyssal Mask versus AP. If you can't pick, then just match the enemy mid. Buying boots as soon as possible, he recommends getting Swifties if you want Saplings to help chase enemies, but tank boots work as well. After this he can choose a mythic, going for Chem Tank if he is the engager for his team, using it for speed to sprint in. Otherwise, if he doesn't need to engage, he goes Frostfire Gauntlet. This lets him play around the edge of fights to slow enemies and stop them entering, giving his team a numbers advantage. Sunfire Cape is the best choice if you want to focus on winning side lane 1v1s. Tear of the Goddess is a good addition here, building into Fimbulwinter. It's a great item for tanks that use mana, like Maokai. He buys Thornmail for anti-heal and then gets more resistance. MidKai loves his tank build, but of course there is another option. It's unproven in mid lane, but he has been testing AP Maokai. Similar to the super popular support Maokai, the AP build focuses on spamming Saplings in bushes and assassinating enemies when they face check them. Here are all of the rune pages he uses so you can swap every game. Biscuits and Time Warp Tonic are the most common secondaries, and they're the best ones if you want to start trying this strategy. Thanks so much for watching and supporting off-meta content as well as this channel. Our Maokai Mid streams and has a YouTube channel, link below, and thanks again to Porofessor for sponsoring this video. Please give it a try, link in the description.